Tonight, I want to talk a little about Rosh HaShanah. Rosh HaShanah Shechali is b'Shabbos. What's special about this year? That the first day of Rosh HaShanah is on Shabbos, which hasn't happened, I think, like 10 years, 14 years, 13 years.
No, that's what I heard.
Sorry?
2009.
So that's 11 years, somewhere around there. And when we finish, if we have time, we'll circle around and we will connect it to that which we've been speaking about the last few weeks in the Tanya Shirim, Tshuva Elah and Tshuva Tata. So, one of the things that we learned in Shahri Yichud V'Amunah, going back a little, is that everything in the world is created through the words of Hashem. The DNA of this world are the Asara Mamarei Shebehem Nivra Elam, the 10 utterances with which Hashem created the world. And everything that exists comes from the Asara Mamaris, either directly or indirectly. Remember, there's Tzirufim and Timures and Chilufim. There are many different ways of switching around the letters and the permutations of the letters and the Gematriyois and the Rosh Tevis. And towards the end of Sharich V'Amunah, I don't recall exactly which perek it was, Dr. Rebbe says that this is not only talking about objects in this world, that every object in the world has unique spiritual energy that derives from the Asar Mamaris, but the same thing is true about time. That every moment in time is created by a different tziruf. So, we take it for granted that time moves. The reason why one moment is different than the next is because every moment has a different energy. Every moment has a different energy, and certainly every day and every month and every year. And this is a very big idea in Chassidus, that we tend to consider time, all time is equal. What differentiates one moment or one day from another is not the time, but what differentiates it is what we make of the time, or what happens during that time. So 2020 will be remembered as a year when something happened. But is 2020 different? No. Interesting things happen during 2020. Right? But comes along Chassidus and says it's not just that time, that one period of time is different than another by virtue of what happens during that time or what we do during the time, but the time itself is essentially different. And there are different energies in different times. Shabbos is a different energy, and a Yom Tov is a different energy. And what Chassidus asks of us is to be in tune with the different energies of the different times of the year, and different days and different weeks and different months. And every week's energy is reflected in the Parshas HaShavua. I was speaking to someone recently, and I asked this person, how are your preparations for Rosh Hashanah coming along? So this person told me, I'm not feeling it. This person is an honest person, straightforward, says it as it is. Mm-hmm. One of the many things that I like about this person. And yeah, that's the truth. The truth is that sometimes we don't feel it. But the fact that we don't feel it doesn't change the reality of what is. There's an example that we've given in the past before about, if you remember, as the fair tracht chabred and the malachim ke malachim nicht. Just because the horses are thinking about the hay, the malachim aren't malachim. I don't want to go that whole mashal. In other words, because you're a horse and all you can think about, not you or that person, because a horse is a horse and can only think about hay, doesn't mean that higher realities exist. So we have to learn about these realities and try to be in tune with them, whether or not we feel them. So this is true about every period of time that has a different energy, and this is especially true when we talk about the arrival of a new year. The pasuk says, towards the beginning of Sefer Devarim, the pasuk says, it's talking about Eretz Yisrael, and the pasuk says, Eretz asher tamid einei Hashem eleikecha ba, meireshis HaShanah v'yad achri Shana. It's a land which upon Hashem's eyes are constantly upon it, from the beginning of the year till the end of the year. Sounds very poetic, but we know the Torah doesn't engage in poetry for the sake of poetry. The Alter Rebbe asks, in the Geras HaKodesh, the Alter Rebbe asks, it should say, the eyes of Hashem are upon the land always, tamid, yeah. From the beginning of the year till the end of the year.
Why is there a time constraint?
Means always. So why are you wasting so many words? We know the Torah is so concise and so exact with its words. Why doesn't the Torah say Hashem's eyes are always on the land? So the Rebbe explains because it is from the beginning of the year till the end of the year. Because every single year a new energy enters this world. So Mereishis HaShanah, from the beginning of the year, from Rosh HaShanah, enters the energy into this world which lasts until the end of the year. And the next year, a new energy begins. So to say that Hashem's providence is always on Eretz Yisrael, and by extension the entire world, because Hashem's providence over the world comes through Eretz Yisrael, so that would imply that it's constant and unchanging. It's not unchanging, it's not, you might want to say it's constant, but actually every single year we get a new energy. So we are a little less than 24 hours away, for those of you who are in this time zone. Those who might be listening to other time zones, might be a little less than that, from an entirely new energy entering this world. So we have the Goyim talking about how 2020 was such a bad year, and we can't wait for 2021, and that's all garbage. There's no significance to 2020, there's no significance to 2021. The Goyish New Year, the secular New Year, is a random date, picked out of a hat. Think about it for a second. The solar year is 365 days. And you can theoretically choose any day on the calendar and say this is the New Year. And from here we begin a year. And next year there is no significance whatsoever to January 1st. And there is no new energy that enters this world on January 1st. What is significant is Tavshin Pei. And Tavshin Pei was a difficult year for Klal Yisrael. But we have to know that Amir Hashem, in a little while, we're having a new year with a new energy entering. And this is Taka, the day when all the energy for the entire year is allocated. And we say always, Tichla Shana v'klal Yiseha, let the year and all its curses go away. Tochel Shana u'bircheiseha, let the new year enter with its new brachas, and that's especially appropriate this year because, as is pointed out in the Sfarim, the words Tochel Shana bircheiseha, the Rosh Tevis, is Shabbos, and this year Rosh HaShanah is on Shabbos. So we have a special brachas entering this year, and that's very significant. The idea that Rosh HaShanah is on Shabbos this year, because Rosh Hashanah is very significant. It's not only the day when all the new energy enters the world, but as brought down in the Sfarim of Chassidus, the New Year. So you'd say that it would be called, the Goyish, they say it's the holiday's New Year. So what would be the analog for that, the parallel for that in Lashon HaKodesh for Rosh Hashanah? We would say Shana Chadasha, or you could say Tchilas HaShanah. Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. What is the implication of it being the head of the year? So for those of you who recall, the end of Likutei Amarim and Perek Nun Aleph, we spoke about this. We spoke about that the way it works is when energy enters the world. So it's true in Olam, in Shana, and Nefesh. We spoke about how all the energy enters the world in the Kodesh HaKadashim, in a nutshell, and from there it spreads throughout the entire world. All the energy to mankind, to humankind, enters through the Rebbe, which is Rosh Tevis, Rosh B'nai Yisrael. In other words, the Moshe Rabbeinu of the Dor, the Tzaddik HaDor, and from there, from the head of the generation, everyone else gets their energy. And the same thing is also true in terms of the year, which is that all the energy enters the world into the world on Rosh Hashanah, on the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, and from there that energy then filters to the rest of the world. Which is why the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are highly, highly significant. It's just like, yes, every part of our body is important. If someone's going to ask you, is your pinky important? Yeah, your pinky is very important. I don't think you'd part with it so easily. But at the end of the day, a doctor who's doing a surgery on a pinky doesn't have to be as careful as a neurosurgeon, as a doctor who's doing surgery on the brain. Well, why is that? Chas v'shalom, you mess up the pinky. Okay, that could damage the pinky, but that will be local damage. Chas v'shalom, a wrong turn in the brain, something wrong in the brain, and that damages the entire body. And the same thing is Rosh Hashanah. That's in the negative, but the positive also. Anything that positive in the brain impacts the whole body positively also. So Rosh Hashanah, the day when the energy for the entire world enters, and also the energy for each one of us individually enters, we have to realize every moment of that day is like a brain cell. And the entire year is going to feel the impact of that moment. Because the energy comes through that day and enters the rest of the year. In Chabad, there's a big emphasis on Rosh Hashanah throughout the 48 hours to be very, very careful with the time. Even more so than on Yom Kippur. Any spare moment to be saying Tehillim, not to speak any Dvarim B'Teilim, not Chas v'Shalom Rosh Hashanah to speak any, and again, the Avodah in Rosh Hashanah is filling up any spare moment with saying Tehillim. And that's again due to the understanding of the preciousness of every single moment of Rosh Hashanah. So, if we understand that, then we understand that this year, when Rosh Hashanah falls out on a Shabbos, we understand that how special that is, because all the light is being filtered in through such a holy day, the day of Shabbos. And that gives the year a very special Shabbosdik energy. And every year is different. Every year has a different energy. You talk about, we know that throughout the generations, there were different tzaddikim who gave kitzin.
What's that?
Kitzin. In other words, they said, in this year, Mashiach is going to come. The Geula is going to come in this year. There were many tzaddikim.
Kitzin is time?
A kates. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah.
that. I thought Kitzin, yeah, I didn't know.
The kitzim is the plural for kates.
I didn't recognize.
The Rambam, the Erachaim, the Alter Rebbe. It's the list of tzaddikim who made kitzim is longer than you would imagine. The Alter Rebbe gave a kates actually. And the obvious question is, were all these people, were they liars? Chas v'shalom? Were they false prophets? Chas v'shalom? What does it mean? So the Baal HaTanya, the Alter Rebbe, actually explains in a mimer printed in the Mamari Admur Azak and HaKtsarim. He says that what these people saw is they saw a special energy that's going to be during this year. A special energy that if it's capitalized upon and if it's leveraged, that year is a very propitious year for Mashiach to come. What they were saying was correct. That was a very special year, and that would have been a year had we, they were really letting us know, don't waste this upcoming year, because this upcoming year is a very, whether it's in 10 years or 20 years, whatever year they gave, it's a very, very special year. By way of example, let's say you have, there's a city that has a drought in it, and a meteorologist sees that 20 miles away there's going to be a rainstorm on a given day. So he tells the people in the city, there's a rainstorm there, quickly go build some tunnels, some channels, some conduits to get water, right? So it's up to you. Are you going to get the water? You're not going to get the water. What they're really telling us is that you realize there will be there will be rain. There will be a special divine revelation, and can you capitalize on that through your avodah? And this upcoming year again has a special energy. It's a Shabbos year, and there's also, fascinatingly, that's been circulating of late, there's a sikha that the Rebbe said 29 years ago, where the Rebbe says that the word pay, the letter pay, is made up of the letters pay and aleph. Now pay and aleph make up the words af, makes up the word anger.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I think we all experienced that this year, Tafshin Pei, we experienced a little of the anger. And the Rebbe says, however, if you take the Pei Aleph, and you take the Aleph Pei, and you turn it around to Pei Aleph, then Pei Aleph is Rosh Tevis of Pelois Arenu, I will show you wonders. So Pei on its own, Tafshin Pei is Af. But when it becomes Pei Aleph, Tafshin Pei Aleph, it's Pelois Arenu. Interesting, the 29 years ago what the Rebbe said. So we have a special year coming up, a Shabbosdik year, a year of Plois Arenu, a year when we'll have, Hashem will show us wonders, and we have to take advantage of this special year with the special brachas that will be coming upon us, Mir Hashem, starting tomorrow night.
Well, Rabbi, you said that every year, Rosh Hashanah, it's a special energy.
A new energy.
For the, I don't know where I heard that every day they have new energy.
That's true. In a smaller way, it's every day. In a smaller day, it's every month. There's a Rosh Chodesh, and the davening also. Mir Hashem, when we get to Igeres HaKodesh, Siman Yudaled, that's what Alter Rebbe talks about it. We will discuss this more at length. The general energy for the year enters Rosh Hashanah, but then every single day, the energy for that day is allocated also. Now,
How can that change? I don't understand.
sorry?
I don't understand how that can change by by people's actions. We learned that nobody could take away or give somebody something more than was destined for this person. Okay, they can't take away from somebody, and they can't give them more. So how is it that that the energy can change from because of what people do?
The energy doesn't change. The question is whether we're opening ourselves up to that energy.
Capitalizing on it,
I
right?
understand.
In other words,
If it's destined for us to get a certain...
there could be blockages. There could be blockages.
That's what I don't understand.
The idea, in fact, the idea of a bracha, is the idea of bringing down the energy to the person that was already their energy. This is a whole topic in Chassidus about that. Which is why when Yaakov gave the brachas to the Shvatim, it says, Ish ki berachasai berachasam. He gave each one the bracha, which was meant for that person. What does that mean? If Yaakov is giving the brachas, he could have given God the bracha that he gave to Asher and the vice versa. No. He saw the energy, which was for each one of them, and he drew it down to them. There could be blockages in the energy. And that's also why, even though that Rosh Hashanah, everything is allocated to us, we have to daven every single day also. But that's a larger topic of conversation, which I know everything because it touches on something larger. Yeah. There'll be a time and place in Mitzvah Shem for everything. There's a lot to learn. Rechava miniyam. Okay.
So how do we capitalize a lawyer's revenue? What's our job would be?
We'll find out. Let's see if we can figure that out. Okay. I mean, there's not one answer to that, but let's see if we can come up with one answer to that. So as we mentioned, this year Rosh Hashanah falls out on a Shabbos. Shabbos is very special. There's a vart from the Alter Rebbe, which it's so incredible it almost sounds comical. Alter Rebbe says that eating kugel on Shabbos is mamtik the dinim, which means it sweetens the severities, just like blowing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. So Alter Rebbe says, so if so, on Rosh Hashanah we should just eat kugel. So he says, and Alter Rebbe says, yeah, you see, Taka, that when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, we eat kugel and we don't blow the shofar. It's not written, the Alter Rebbe didn't write this, but this is a Kabbalah from Hasidim in the name of the Alter Rebbe, which is obviously a... What?
What do the Sfadim do? They don't make kugel.
Okay, they don't eat kugel. We'll figure... By the time we finish today, I think we'll have a deeper understanding of what that means. Now, obviously, what makes Rosh Hashanah unique this year is the fact that we don't blow the shofar on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. There's a vart from the Imrei Chaim of Vishnitz. He says that why don't we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah? Because the pasuk says, no, this is not a kugel vart. The pasuk says, Yoim teruah yiyalachem. Now, what is teruah? The word teruah can also mean to break, like teroyim b'shevet barzal. The word teruah can also mean to break something. So Yom Teruah Yelachem means it's a day to break yourself. The shofar is supposed to cause us a shivrain, it's supposed to cause us to be broken. That's all when Rosh Hashanah falls out during the weekday. But Shabbos is not lochem, Shabbos hi lashem, Shabbos lashem alekechem. So on Shabbos there's nothing to break. Yom Tov is lochem taka. We know that Yom Tov b'chlal, the Torah says about it lochem many times, right? Atzeres hi lochem. Shabbos is Lashem. So Shabbos, there's nothing to break, so Shabbos we don't blow the shofar.
Yeah, but that's the Rabbanon you don't blow. And the Raisa you blow.
That's correct.
And the Basin they blow.
That's correct. So, this takes us to the larger issue of why Taka don't we blow the shofar on Shabbos. So the Gemara says it's known as the Gzeira de Rabba. Min HaTorah Taka we blow the shofar on Shabbos also. But Rabba came along and made a Gzeira and says that because everyone is mechuyev in hearing shofar, so there's a worry that someone will go and take a shofar to the baki, to the Rav, to find out the halachas, how to blow. And Yavirenu Dalad Ames B'Shus HaRabim Chas V'Shalom will carry it in the Shus HaRabim. So therefore, Rabbi says that on Shabbos we don't blow the shofar. Now, except for in the Beis Hamikdash, and except for in a bezdin or a big bezdin, as he mentioned, there's a Kabbalah that in the bezdin of the Rif they actually blew the shofar. Even in Yerushalayim, as recent as in the 1900s, there was also a whole you might want to say, controversy about blowing the shofar, and there was one of the big rabbanim there who actually blew the shofar in the year 1904 and the year 1905 on Shabbos, and Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, who was against this. Nevertheless, he went and he stood behind the shul to listen. So there is what?
Yeah, the Mishnah.
Yeah, Rechem Zaka. It was actually blown in the shul of Rechem Zaka. It's a whole story all for itself. But the bottom line is, normative halacha is that we do not blow the shofar today on Shabbos. And in Chabad Chassidus, there are 100 mamarim that begin with the words Yom Tov Rosh HaShanah Shachalis B'Shabbos. They ask, how is this possible? You have such a great mitzvah. The mitzvah of Tkiyah Shofar. Yes, we know that it says, Al Ti Yeshiv V'Sheiko, we're not supposed to go and to start judging mitzvahs and say, this one is more important, this one's less important. Nevertheless, we know that there are mitzvahs that are kalis and there are mitzvahs that are chamuris. We know, we're not supposed to go and say, I'll do the more important mitzvahs and I'm going to ignore the less important mitzvahs. But ultimately, the Mishnah doesn't tell us there's no such thing as a kala and a chamura. It's saying that shouldn't be your cheshbon. When you're doing a mitzvahs, you have to do every single mitzvah. But yes, there are mitzvahs kalis, there are mitzvahs chamuris, and Tkiyah Shofars, as we all know intuitively feel, and there's many, and there's a lot of support for this. It's a very, very important mitzvah, and no one can do this mitzvah. Not even the greatest tzaddik. Why? Because some idiot might go and carry the shofar to the Rav and the place where there is no Erev. So all of Klal Yisrael is missing out
Because of that.
because of this.
Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
But it's a schus that we listen to the Rabbanim and say that we shouldn't.
But what's Rabbi thinking? What's Rabbi thinking?
Yeah, but it's not much of a saying. What's the wisdom behind it?
Yeah.
Because of one guy.
Far-fetched. It's far-fetched.
It's far-fetched.
It is.
I want you to imagine that someone, a Rav today, stands up and says, okay, first day Pesach, no one eats matzah, because someone might carry the matzah to Rav to ask if it's kazayis or not. How many people, what would people say to such a tikkun? Just try to imagine that. You're depriving Klal Yisrael of a mitzvah. Put up signs on every single neighborhood. Don't carry your shofar. What?
To make an eitzah, it's an eitzah.
Yeah. Now, the question becomes even deeper when you understand exactly what shofar is about. When you understand the idea of the mitzvah of shofar, al pi chassidus. We know that the idea of Rosh HaShanah is, the main concept of Rosh HaShanah is Kabbalas HaMalchus. And the words of Chazal, Hashem says, I want shetam luchuni aleichem, I want you to coronate me. I want you to make me your king, to accept me as your king. Rosh Hashanah, the climax of the tefillah is when we scream out to Hashem, Meloich al kol ha'olam kulei b'kvedacha, we ask Hashem, we beg Hashem, please, be the melech. And why is this necessary? So it's explained in this Farim that let's understand let's go a little deeper into the psychology of a melech. We don't really understand what a melech is. You know, there are people who, they're worried the Mashiach comes, we're going to have a melech, we're going to return to monarchy. It's because there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what a melech is, because we model a melech after our leaders. When I say leaders, with quotation marks. We don't have leaders today. In other words, let's put it in different words. Those in leadership positions are not leaders. They're not leaders. What is a real leader? The first melech of Klal Yisrael was Shaul HaMelech. Regarding Shaul HaMelech, we are told, tells us Hanach, that he was Mishichmoi Ulevmayla Gevoya Mina'am. He was, you ever heard the expression, head and shoulders above? Where does that come from? Shaul HaMelech was physically head and shoulders above everyone. He was tall to the point that his shoulders was taller than the heads of the rest of Klal Yisrael. And that was a physical reflection of a spiritual reality. He was greater than everyone else, spiritually greater. Whatever head and shoulders means spiritually, which we're not going to get into right now. He was spiritually greater than everyone else. In fact, he was so much spiritually greater than everyone else that he had no interest in being the king. Because he'd have to lower himself down. Again, you have to understand, I know that for those of you familiar with the story of Nach, you might have questions, but ultimately we have to understand, we're dealing here with people who were tremendous tzaddikim. And Shaul, the Gemara says about Shaul ben Shana, Shaul ben Molche, that he was without a sin like a 1-year-old. He was Very, very holy person. Shaul is going to go and become a king? Why would he be interested in that? Why would he be interested in being the king? All the people are nothing to him. These people aren't on his level at all. He'd rather sit in his own room and daven and learn Torah. It's not a covet for him to be the king, it's a hashpala for him to be the king. It's a degradation, it's a humiliation. You know the famous story about the joke about this person who comes into the city and he's looking for the president of the Jewish community. So he stops someone he sees in the street and says, "Tell me, Chaim Yankel, the president, where does he live?" Chaim Yankel, that lowlife, that corrupt person. He starts screaming at him until he can't take it anymore. He goes off and asks the next person, "Please tell me where Chaim Yankel lives." And once again, a tirade begins. Goes to the third person, and a fourth person, finally he goes to the fifth person and says, "I know that Chaim Yankel is a terrible, horrible human being, but please just tell me where he lives." He gave him his address. He goes, knocks on the door, he has to speak to him about something, but before he leaves he says, "Let me ask you a question. I see that you're the president of the community over here. What's your motivation? Why did you decide you want to become the president?" He says, "Of course, for the covet. What don't you do for covet?" Now the leaders who think that they have the covet, but for Shaul HaMelech, let's talk the way he was. He didn't need the covet. He was so much higher and beyond everyone. That is the ideal of a king. And that is definitely true about Hashem. That for Hashem to be our king, he needs that. We spoke about this last week, also a little, but for Hashem it's a hashpala. We say, L'cha Hashem HaGedula, and what is HaGedula? Gedula is Ma'aseh Bereishis, that he created the worlds. But what does Chazal say? B'makim shata moitza gedulasi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sham ata moitza an v'sinusei, which means that area which we think is Gedula for Hashem is really an anava for Hashem. It's a degradation. Bria So'elim, for Hashem to involve himself with creation is for him a degradation. And that's so different from our society, where our leaders, used to be in America, the first more than 100 years after the United States became the president, that the people who were running for president, they had the dignity, they actually didn't campaign. They had other people campaign for them. The guy didn't stand up and said, "Vote for me for president." Yet they had delegates, they had deputies who went. That changed around 1900, that changed. And now you have people who push it, they're driven by honor. For them it's the biggest honor. They want to lead. And because they want to lead, they're not leaders. Because in order to become a leader, they have to cede every element, even if they were greater than everyone else, which they're not. Okay? They're basically, the famous vart of the Chafetz Chaim, where he says that before Mashiach comes, Pnei Hadir ki Pnei Kelev, the face of the generation is like the face of a dog. Pnei Hadir means the leaders of the generation. They're like a dog. What does that mean, like a dog? Just like a dog. You ever saw a person walking a dog? You'll see the dog is always walking in front. You never see a person walking in the dog is behind them. So if you're looking, it looks like the dog is the leader over here. But if you'll pay attention, you'll notice that every once in a while the dog looks back to make sure the master is following him. Because who's really the leader? Pnei Hadir, our leaders, they're like the dog. They look like they're leading, but they're really the dog. They're turning around all the time, making sure, do I still have the crowd? Do I still have the crowd? And to make sure to say the right thing and to do the right thing. It's not really about leadership. In Yiddishkeit, the Melech is a leader. Why? Because intrinsically the Melech is higher than the nation. So much higher than the nation. And therefore, because he's so much higher, he doesn't even want to be the king. Which is why you have to have Ubikshu Hashem Melikehem Ves David Malkam. There has to be a Kabbalah Samalchus, and there has to be a Hachtara, there has to be a coronation, and the purpose of the coronation is the nation comes to the king and says, "Please, please, please, we are mevatel ourselves to you, and we're accepting you, and please accede to become our king." And the king sees this, and when he sees this, it's actually mo'oder, it awakens within him the tainug, the pleasure in being the leader. So it requires the bittul of the Am to the Melech in order for the Melech to agree to become. And that's our view of Mashiach. Mashiach is not a leader, is not a dictator, is not an autocrat. To the contrary, he's someone who's so much higher than us that we beg him to be our king, not someone who conquers lands. Now, the way Hashem created the world, the first time that we accepted the kingship of Hashem was on the 6th day of creation. That's when Adam HaRishon, the Medrash says, he turned to all the animals and said to the animals that we have to go, we have to bow down to Hashem. And when they all bow down to Hashem, so then Hashem Malach Geus Lavish, which why that's the shir of Friday, the 6th day of creation, is Hashem Malach Geus Lavish. When did Hashem become the Melech? when there was a Kabbalah Samalchus by the world over here. But every single year this has to happen again. As we mentioned earlier, Hashem runs this world on 1 year plans. Even though Hashem is infinite, but every year he makes a plan for 1 year. When that year finishes, once again Hashem withdraws and loses his interest in creation. And every year on Rosh Hashanah, we have to, once again, make a Hachtara and a Kabbalah HaMalchus and awaken within Hashem the desire to create the world again for another year. In fact, from tomorrow night when it becomes dark, until the Tkiyas, the world is running on fumes. On fumes. In other words, really, the world is on very shaky grounds because with the entry of the new year, Hashem lost interest in creation. And by Tkiyah Shofar is when the flow comes down, when we reignite by Hashem the desire to be a king, and Hashem then issues the energy for the entire year. But that's what Shofar is all about. The Rasag says, we know that there are many reasons for Tkiyah Shofar, and the Rambam says that it's a choik, but there are different reasons that are given, and one of the reasons the Rasag says is that in olden times, by the coronation of a king, they would blow shofar, and us blowing the shofar is our way of coronating Hashem, of crowning Hashem as our king. Once we understand the purpose of blowing shofar, the question of why we don't blow shofar on Shabbos becomes even bigger. How is the world existing? The whole world is dependent on Tkiyah Shofar. Sometimes we don't realize the gravity of what's going on. When Yidden come into Shul and they blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, because of that the world is sustained for another year. Otherwise the world would cease to exist because Hashem loses interest. So how does the world continue to exist? And how is it possible that we don't blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah, which falls out on Shabbos? It's not only that it's an important mitzvah, all the cosmos, all of creation is waiting for the Yidden to blow the shofar for the energy refresh which is necessary to keep the world going. So there's actually a famous, what's called a hemshech of the Rebbe Rashab. I don't know if you see it's right there. There's like two copies, one next to the. See that big bronze sefer over there? Right there. I would stand up, but I'm connected by an umbilical cord over here. No, that's right. Right. The bronze sefer, the big bronze sefer. You're not to the right. Toots farm to the right, to the left of that. To the left of that. There you go. Okay? So you see this sefer over here, it's called Yom Tiv Shel Rosh Hashanah Tafresh Samach Vav. Okay? So this is a set of, the Rebbe Rashab started saying a series of Mamarim on Rosh Hashanah Tafresh Samach Vav. And there are 50, it's like serialized Mamarim, 56 Mamarim. He finished this set, it after Shavuos Tafresh Samach Zayin. So it went on for almost 2 years. And the first words of the first mimer is Yom Tov Shel Shoshana Tafresh Shechalis B'Shabbos. That's why it's called Yom Tov Shel Shoshana, because that year Tafresh Samach Vav will fall on Shabbos. And if you go to the end of the Sefer, so a year and 3 quarters later, the Rebbe says, well, based on everything that we just said, now we can answer the question of why we don't blow the Shofar on Shabbos. That was
1905.
So it was 1905, yeah. Rosh Hashanah, which, by the way, incidentally, is the same year that guy, Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger, blew the shofar in Yerushalayim on Shabbos. Yeah. So,
does Hasidas explain in a deeper fashion than what the Gemara says about you afraid somebody might carry it outside?
Right.
Does Hasidas give a better explanation or something deeper?
A deeper, yeah. That's what we're talking about right now. Yeah. So the answer that the Rebbe Rashab gives, and this is really echoing what's brought down in earlier Sfarim and brought down later again, is that the idea of blowing the shofar, as mentioned, is that we're trying to elicit and evoke Hashem's oineg, Hashem's tainug, His pleasure in creating the worlds. What is Shabbos? Shabbos is oineg. Chemdas yamim oisei karasa, v'karasa l'Shabbos oineg, right? Shabbos is all about oineg, and Yidden have oineg on Shabbos, Hashem has oineg on Shabbos. So therefore, on Shabbos, we don't have to blow the shofar. Because that which we accomplish through blowing the shofar, on Shabbos, it happens automatically. Hashem's oinig is automatically on full display, so Shabbos, We don't need to blow the shofar. Now the question becomes, then why is there a mitzvah in the Torah? And why in the Beis HaMikdash do they blow it? Okay, so that Chassidus explains there are different levels of oinig, and the level of oinig of Hashem that they managed to elicit through the Tkiyah Shofar in the Beis HaMikdash was something which is even higher than Shabbos. But now that we're in Golus, we anyways can't reach that level of oinig which they reached in the Beis HaMikdash. The level of oinig of Hashem which we are able to reach throughout Tkiyah Shofar and Rosh Hashanah is one which Shabbos substitutes for that. So this is the beer that was given in Chassidus, again, many times. 21 years ago, Shabbos Parsha, 31 years ago, 1989. That's 31 years ago, right? So 31 years ago, Shabbos Parsha is at 7 V'yelach Tavshin Memtes. So the Rebbe spoke about this idea. This was the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah Tavshin Nun was Shabbos. So the Rebbe, he once again repeated the whole beer and Chassidus, and the Rebbe says, but there's still a fundamental question that we need to address and that we need to answer. And that is, if the question, why don't we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, at least in Chabad Chassidus, is one of the most popular Rosh Hashanah questions. We open the second most popular question, or maybe even the first most popular question, is why is it that Rosh Hashanah, we celebrate Rosh Hashanah on Aleph Tishrei, which is the day when Adam HaRishon was created, and why don't we celebrate it on Chafei Elul, which is the anniversary of the creation of the world? This past week, Chafei Elul, this past Monday, was the 5,781st anniversary of the creation of the world, and no one thought about it for a moment. No one marked it. I'm not saying no one, but probably most people. There's no special tefillos, there's no nothing. Now you would think that for beginning time again, when do you begin? At the beginning, at Bereshis Bara Elokim. When was Bereshis Bara Elokim? On Chafei Elul. So if there's one time in the year when everything once again has to begin again, that would be L'chaira. And instead,
it took 6 days to create
what?
the world. Hashem didn't make the world in one day. It took him 6 days
to finalize it.
Yeah.
Okay, but everything came into existence on Chafei. And then afterwards, it was just a matter of.
How did everything come into
That's what Bereshis Bara Elokim Eis HaShamayim V'Ha'aretz, As HaShamayim V'Kol Tzava, so Ha'aretz is Kol
There
Tzava.
was no Adam.
Adam was there in potential. The earth from which Adam came was there. The Chazal say this, that the first day everything was, the Rashi says this, everything was created on the first day, and then everything was just fixed on that particular day. The sun and the moon were also created on the first day.
At that time, but it was there.
Bottom line is, the beginning of everything is Chafei Elul. There's no question about that. And then we stand on Rosh Hashanah, and we make this grand statement. We say, Zeh hayoim tchilas masecha. This is the day, the beginning of your creation. It doesn't even seem to be accurate.
Started 6
It's 6 days later.
Yeah.
What, we're running on Jewish time? Well, what's going on over here?
Jewish seconds.
Talking about Chabad time. You know the joke. What happens if you take a Lubavitcher and you mix with a Yekka? Never heard the joke? So the classical answer to that is, you have someone who comes exactly half an hour late to everything. And then I heard another version is that if you marry the two, then you have a Mashiach that comes on time. Lak upon him. So Chassidus is explained. These are topics we've talked over the years. Reuven probably knows this all by heart already. When Hashem created the world on the first day of creation, it was Hashem's initiative. We talk about Kabbalas HaMalchus Ha'idei Am. There was no So it was Hashem's act of graciousness, of kindness. Ki chafetz chesed. That's not what Hashem wanted. Ultimately, as we know, the purpose is that everything should be through our avodah. Hashem doesn't want to give and give and give when we don't deserve, because that's not the purpose. The purpose is dira b'tachtonim, that the inhabitants of the lower realms, that we, through our initiative, we create a home for Hashem. We are the ones who are mekabel the malchus of Hashem upon us. So really, what happened on the first day of creation, in the grand scheme of things, if you're talking about the larger purpose, the larger mission and goal, was very insignificant. The first really significant thing that happened is when Adam Rishon was created, and he gathered, as we mentioned, all the animals, and they all were mekabel the malchus of Hashem. That was the day when we took the initiative and accepted Hashem as our melech. That one-time occurrence that Hashem created the world on Chafei Adar, that's something which never reoccurs, because that was a one-time thing which Hashem did. He says, I'm creating the world, but from afterwards, from when I create the human being, from Rosh Hashanah, now it's all up to you. Your avodah. It's all about your avodah. Lamasa yadecha tichsev. Hashem is looking for our avodah. And the whole point of Rosh Hashanah, the reason why Rosh Hashanah is on Aleph Tishri and not on Chafei Elul, is because Aleph Tishri, Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of everything is when we work. It's about avodah sa'adam. It's about our avodah. And when we, through our avodah, we bring into this world a level of godliness which is much higher than was here when the world was created. Which is why Chafei Elul, the word Chafei Elul, Chafei is koi. And in Rosh Hashanah we say Zeh. Zeh hayom tchilas masecha. What is the difference between Zeh and koi? So we know what Chazal say. The Kol HaNeviim, the Snabu, Bikoi, all the Neviim, they said koi. Koi means something like this. And Moshe Rabbeinu said Zeh. Zeh adavar asher dibar Hashem. Zeh, this. The idea of that in this world we can have Zeh, that Hashem should be revealed in a way that Zeh, Mare Betzboi V'imar Zeh, Zeh Keli V'aveyu, that we can point to Hashem in a clear way. That's through our Avodah, which is much greater than anything we got on Koi, which is why Chafei Elul was not really marked, because it's not significant. In the grand scheme of things, what's significant is our work, not what Hashem did once 5,781 years ago. So if Rosh Hashanah is all about Avodah Sa'adam, us being mekabel the malchus of Hashem, and us eliciting the tainug, the pleasure of Hashem in creating the worlds, so what does it help that we're saying that Shabbos, on Shabbos, Hashem's oinig happens automatically on its own? How does that help us? On Rosh Hashanah, we need to have Avodah Sa'adam. In general, by the way, that's the difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov. Shabbos, we say, is Mikach Shavikaim. Shabbos is always holy. Hashem makes it holy. Yom Tov we make holy, which is why we say Mekadesh Yisrael v'Azman. We don't say Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hashabbos. Mekadesh HaShabbos, Hashem makes Shabbos holy. Yom Tov is our Avodah. Mekadesh Yisrael, Hashem makes us holy, and we make v'Azman, and we make the Yom Tovs holy, right? Shabbos is Hashem. That's really nice, but at the end of the day, if the whole point of Rosh Hashanah is about our Avodah, then how does this concept that on Shabbos, the Tainug, the Oinig, is evoked and elicited on its own, how does that help us when there is no Avodah Sa'adam? This is the question the Rabbi asked. Again, Shabbos Parshas Netzam Vayelach Tavshin Memtes. So the Rebbe answers based on a mimer from the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek, who tonight is his birthday, the grandson of the Baal HaTanya, he was born on Erev Rosh Hashanah. And they're Tav Kuf Memtes. That's 1789. The Rebbe's great grandfather. He says, why is it that on Shabbos we don't work on Shabbos? He says, because on Shabbos, Elokus, godliness, is revealed and palpable and can be sensed in this world. During the entire week, Hashem is hidden in this world. On Shabbos, He's revealed. When you're in the king's palace, we spoke about this a few weeks ago. When you're in the king's palace and standing in front of the king, you don't work, you don't move. But why don't you work and why don't you move? It's not even a choice you make. When you're standing in front of a king, your bittul is so strong that you can't move. So there are two levels of bittul. One level of bittul to Hashem is, I am a mitzias, and I make the conscious decision to be mevatel myself to Hashem, to subjugate myself as Hashem and accept Him as my king. But in that case, there's me. And even after I accept Hashem as the king, there's me with my desires and my mind and my heart. And I am accepting Hashem as my king. And that's a level of bittul. Higher level of bittul is where there is no you even to go and to accept the king. You're so bottled that you don't do anything. The bittul is expressed by not doing anything. Silberberg says, when you blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, it's because it's during the weekday. During the weekday, Hashem isn't so revealed. So therefore, the bittul that we have to Hashem is an act. If we want to go maybe and paraphrase what the Imrei Chaim said, Yom Teruah Yeh Lachem. Because there is a lachem, because there is a you, because it's the weekday, in the weekday there is a you independent of Hashem, so therefore there has to be a Yom Teruah, therefore there has to be a day when you break yourself, and your breaking yourself is through the shofar. The shofar is your act of breaking yourself, it's your act of expressing your bittul to Hashem. But on Shabbos there is no lachem. Shabbos hila Hashem, and Shabbos there is no lachem. Which means that on Shabbos we reach such a high level of bittul that we don't need to take a shofar and blow it. Because any action that we do is an expression of self. We don't do. And that's what causes the flow from all the worlds. So it's not that on Shabbos there is no Avodah Sa'adam. There is Avodah Sa'adam. But Avodah Sa'adam is higher. It's an Avodah Sa'ad. Our Avodah this coming year is one which is such a high bittul to Hashem that it doesn't even express itself by doing something. We're standing in front of the king with utter silence, command the machli, with a complete bittul to the point there isn't even a need to do an act that expresses a bittul, because the action expresses your own self, but rather it's a bittul be'etzem, it's an absolute bittul. We don't blow the shofar. We're not something other than Hashem that has to blow the shofar in order to accept upon ourselves the kingship of Hashem. So even when we don't blow the shofar, it's not as if, so we're off duty and we can go to sleep and Hashem is taking care of it all. No, the idea of Shabbos is that we reach such a high state of this year Rosh Hashanah, we reach such a high state of bittul to Hashem that it's an even greater hashpah, but it's also our avodah. And I'm wondering if, going back to what we spoke about in the beginning about the kugel, if maybe that's the deeper meaning of that vart. Was everyone here when we said that vart, or some of you came in the middle to repeat the vart? That the Alter Rebbe said, he says that eating kugel has the power to be mamtik dinim, just like blowing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. So then he asked, so then why then Rosh Hashanah we should just eat kugel? Why we blow the shofar? He said, that's why Shabbos, Shechali is, but Rosh Hashanah we don't blow the shofar. Maybe the deeper meaning over here is, on Shabbos we eat kugel and it's a mitzvah to eat kugel. Why is it a mitzvah to eat kugel on Shabbos? Because on Shabbos there is no lachem. If there's a lachem, if you're eating kugel and it's about you and it's about your own taivas, but Shabbos it's Shabbos LaHashem. When you're eating kugel on Shabbos, that's also a mitzvah. Why? Because there is no you separate from Hashem. And therefore on Shabbos it's a mitzvah to eat meat and to eat wine. That's why you wanted to know about the Sfardim. It's not, I don't think the Inyan is the kugel. Maybe I'm wrong. I know that there are people talk about the godless of kugel. I think the kugel might be a metaphor for the fact that on Shabbos, whether it's shont, whether it's chamin, whatever you want to call it, everything that we eat on Shabbos, we don't need to have the shofar. Why? Because on Shabbos, which is Rosh Hashanah, even when we eat kugel, that we're accomplishing shofar. Why? Because on Shabbos eating the kugel is only an expression of bittul to Hashem, which is what is Tkiyah Shofar all about, is about bittul to Hashem. And on Shabbos we reach such a high level of bittul that even the kugel also is bittul to Hashem.
Does it matter which type of kugel?
Good question. I believe that the traditional kugel, I know that I think in America we've departed from that. The traditional kugel from Europe, the word kugel is round, by the way. In Yiddish, the word kugel means a circle. It's round and it's made with lakshan. That's the traditional, and there's a symbolism to the roundness of it and the lakshan of it. Today we have square potato kugels. I think we just lost the whole, the art of the spiritual art of kugel. But that's a conversation for a different day also. What?
Tell my wife, make sure she makes a round
lakshan kugel. Yeah.
Yerushalmi is the best.
Yerushalmi is the best. Okay. Now, by the way, I said we're not going to need the. I said we're not going to need the Tanya, but if you want, you can open up to page 198. Yes.
Now, very often when Chazal say give reasons for certain things, like I'm not blowing your shofar because of your face, somebody's going to carry it outside. And not only here, but many other things, they give reasons which just don't seem to make much sense.
So the Rebbe.
So I'm asking, what I'm asking is, were these reasons just giving some answer to the Hamonam that they should have?
No. So the Rebbe explains. The Rebbe asks this question. The Rebbe says, if this is the case, then why do you have to have the whole gzeira about a person walking on the street? Just say you don't need to blow the shofar on Shabbos. The Rebbe says like this: that even though Taka on Shabbos we don't need to blow the shofar, but because in the Beis Hamikdash they did blow the shofar on Shabbos, so you would think that just like in many other areas you make a zecher lamikdash. For example, taking the lulav all 7 days zecher lamikdash. So therefore, if someone wants to blow the shofar on Shabbos, even though it's unnecessary, it could be a zecher lamikdash. The reason why they took away the zecher lamikdash was because gzeira shema yavirenu. That's not a reason why. In other words, the fact that we don't do it is because it's not needed. So then, what does it have to do with the gzeira shema yavirenu? That's the reason why it became usher to do it. And we can't do it as a Zeichel HaMikdash.
It became us, or why?
Because of the person. In other words, it's not depriving us of the mitzvah. It's not that because of that person who might walk in the street with it, so therefore I can't do the mitzvah and I can't accomplish what has to be accomplished. No. The mitzvah, by the way, there's actually interesting, the Rebbe points to Yerushalmi, where Taka, the Yerushalmi holds that Midiraisa, there is no mitzvah to Kiyah Shofar on Shabbos. But the Bavli doesn't hold that way. But the Nekuda is, the mitzvah is not needed. But let's say you say, I want to do it. They did it in the Beis HaMikdash. Zecher LaMikdash. A lot of things we do Zecher LaMikdash. Sfira Soimer, Zecher LaMikdash, right? So why can't? So because, however, there might be a person who carries a Dal Damis, and that's why the Chacham said you don't need to do it because the Inyan Shabbos accomplishes it on its own, and because you don't need to do it, and because the person might carry it, so therefore we're saying just don't do it. You understand? It's not the carrying of the Shus Rabbim is not mevatel the mitzvah; it's mevatel the Zecher LaMikdash. And these are larger conversations. We can sit and talk for a long time. Obviously, we're not going in depth in any one area, just to give you a little taste of what's going on. Now, in the Geras HaTshuva, we just finished last week, we finished Perik Tes. If you look at the end of Perik Yud, on page 198, and we finished learning about Shuva Ilah and Shuva Tata. So, if you see, go down like 2/3 of the way, the first word line is Yoim. So he says over there, it is known to those who know, Shabbos is the level of Tshuva Ilah. The Shabbos, the word Shabbos is Oisius Toshev Enosh. The word Shabbos corresponds to Toshev Enosh. Shabbos, the idea of Tshuva. But what level of Tshuva? The idea of Tshuva Ilah. We're not. When we get there, Mirz Hashem, within the next few, maybe next year, this year afterwards, we'll talk more about the connection between Shabbos and Shuva Ilah. Maybe it'll be next week. But obviously the connection is coming across very clearly. We have this year Rosh HaShanah as Shabbos. So the Rosh of the Shana is Shabbos, which means that we have a year of Shuva Ilah as opposed to Shuva Tata. What is Shuva Ilah? You know, we spoke about this last week. So let's return again, talk a little, and remind ourselves what's the difference between Shuva Tata and Shuva Ilah, and we'll understand the connection to everything that we just spoke about up until this point. We explained that Shuva Tata is Shuva for Averis. A person did Avera, and by doing that damaged his neshama, caused damage to his neshama, caused Golos HaShechina. Basically, you messed things up. Things were good, and you messed them up. Tshuva means we need a restore. We need a reboot. You need, as we say, restore to factory settings, right? When your phone is all messed up, so you give it to the technician, they restore it to factory settings. First tshuva is restore to factory settings, which means I need to get my neshama back to the pure state it was before I did an avera. That's tshuva tata. That's the lower level of tshuva. And what does that involve? Before I do tshuva tata, I'm a rasha. That's the halacha. Someone does an avera as a rasha. And after I do tshuva tata, I'm a tzaddik. Before I did tshuva tata, I'm a poyrikoil. I was poyrikoil malchus shamayim. And now I'm mekabel malchus shamayim. That's what tshuva tata accomplishes. However, even after a person does tshuva tata, they remain a mitzias on their own. They remain a mitzias. I used to be a bad mitzias. I was messed up. And now I'm a tzaddik. Now I'm a good mitzias. Now I'm someone who's listening to Hashem. But I remain me. The idea that I am me, that I'm a Metzias, that I'm an identity of my own, that's what happened when my neshama came down into my guf. Before my neshama came down into my guf, I was one with Hashem. I wasn't a Metzias. Tshuva Ilah is restoring my neshama to the way it was before it entered my body. That achdus with Hashem and that bittul to Hashem before it entered the body. Tshuva Tata makes me from evil to bad, evil to righteous. Tshuva Ilah makes me from yesh to ayin, makes me from something into completely batal and connected to Hashem. Think about that. That literally parallels, yes, blowing shofar and not blowing shofar. When Rosh Hashanah falls out on the week, then we do tshuva tata. There's me, and I'm saying, Hashem, I accept you as my king. I'm going to blow a shofar as the symbol of me accepting you as a king. That's tshuva tata. But when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, then we have tshuva ilah. Then I'm one with the king. Because it's Shabbos. Shabbos is tashev. And because I'm one with the king, I don't need to blow the shofar. I don't need to do any act to express my bittul because I am one with the king. I am bottled to the king entirely. The whole week, 6 days of the week, the oyer comes into the world in a way of tzimtzum, so therefore the world is a metzias. And the bittul that we have is a lower level of bittul, which requires us to express that bittul in an action. But when it comes Shabbos, so then the world is what's called the aliyah sa'ilmas on Shabbos. And we're able to access a higher level. Tshuva, the world returns to its source, and then we can connect to Hashem on such a level when Tkiyah Shofar becomes unnecessary because we've reached a higher level of bittul, which correlates with Tshuva Ilah. So the whole topic that we're talking about the last few weeks, Tshuva Tata and Tshuva Ilah, actually works very well with the idea of blowing shofar. And what's special about this year is that this year we do not blow the shofar, not on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. So you asked, what is our avodah of this year? You asked that earlier.
So then you have the second day. The second day you go down.
It's a good question. We need the second day. There's a, talk about Shivim Panim Latera. There's another sikha from the Rabbi where he says that shows you, no matter how great it happens, if it comes Milmayla, you need still the second day, you need a blow because you need Avodah Satachten. But that doesn't really mamash l'chir, it doesn't work well with the sikha that we just said, because according to that, even the first day is also Avodah Satachten. So tzarech liyashiv between these two. Yeah.
It's really one day.
Sorry?
It's really not too, it's really Yom HaRicht.
By the way, there's a whole other element which I'm not even getting into, which is, at the end of the day, we have to understand that there's really a third level of bittul, which is in the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, we said one level, the one level of bittul is what we achieve every year Rosh Hashanah through blowing shofar. A higher level of bittul is what we achieve Rosh Hashanah, Shchalit, Shabbos, when we don't blow a shofar. But in the Beis HaMikdash, they did blow the shofar. That's an even higher level of bittul, which the Rebbe does discuss in that sikha also, but for time constraints, we're not going to be talking about that right now. But in Yitz Hashem Taka, we should be zeicher this year to spend Rosh Hashanah in the Beis HaMikdash together with Mashiach. Tkab b'shofar gadol chirusenu, yitaka b'shofar gadol, and to be zeicher to that bekar of mamish. But in terms of what was Haveda this year, I think we have to up our ante to Tshuva Ilah. And I will conclude with a mashal that's brought down that there was once a person who seemingly in the shtetl is a very, very simple person, a poor person, a simple person, and one day he walks into shul and he's wearing, on the weekday, he's wearing Shabbos clothing. Shachris, he's wearing Shabbos clothing. Mincha is wearing Shabbos clothing. Maidev. People in the city are wondering, what's this all about? So they figured they must have made a mistake about this guy. He's probably a tzaddik nister. And he probably had Gili Eliyahu today. So that's why he's wearing Big Day Shabbos. So they decided to send a whole delegation to the person's house to give him kavod. So the delegation comes to the house and they knock on the door. And the person's surprised to see the Shiva Tuvei ear, the whole, what do you want? He says, please, they say, please give us a bracha. You're such a holy person. He says, what are you talking about? He says, yeah, you're wearing Shabbos clothing today. You must have had Gili Eliyahu. Guy says, what do you want from me? I'm a poor guy. I used to have 2 pairs of clothing. And my weekday clothing got torn, so I didn't have any choice. I wore my Shabbos clothing. That's all. So what's the nimshal? The nimshal is that there's tshuva tata and tshuva ilah. Tshuva ilah is Shabbos clothing, as mentioned. We're going to learn more about this Mitzvah Shem next week. Tshuva ilah is Shabbos clothing. Next week also Shabbos tshuva. Tshuva tata is the weekday clothing. So sometimes a person is busy with tshuva ilah, he's wearing a Shabbos clothing, you think he must be a very holy person if he's doing tshuva ilah. It just turns out that his weekday clothing are torn. In other words, sometimes we realize we're such a low generation. I don't know if we can do tshuva tata. I don't know if we can fix all the mistakes that I made. So we go straight for the Shabbos clothing, we go straight for tshuva elah. This year is the year to go straight for tshuva elah. As we said in the tashlich, which we say, we ask Hashem to give us tshuva elah. It's in the nusach of tashlich. We go straight for tshuva elah, straight for the higher level of bittul Hashem, straight to trying to channel Hashem in our lives in all ways, as we spoke in Mitzvah Hashem, as we spoke last week, what that means, right? What's the lashon in the pasuk that we spoke last week? Nefesh, what's the lashon? Nefesh falash. I forgot to. Lahachyes ruach shvalan, right? To channel Hashem, mahu racham, afata racham, tshuva elah means a total bittul to Hashem to the point that we are not a mitzias, we're channeling Hashem's, we're learning Torah, and we're channeling Hashem's words through our mouths, and we're mahu rachum, afata rachum, and that's the year for tshuva elah, and through tshuva elah, we'll be zeicha to the tkah b'shefer gadol. Everyone who's here and everyone who's listening, a good gebenst year, ksiluch simateva for us and for all Klal Yisrael, a year of health.
Amen.
And a year of brachas for all Yidden, wherever they may be, and the main bracha, the Geula Mitzvah Shlema, now mamash.
Amen.